Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for joining this the last session on adaptive approaches to evaluation. This has been a fantastic journey and very good training. We're here with Jordi and Joseph.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Accompanied
Hi, hello.
in all the other the training sessions, and this one is the last one on the adaptive evaluation mindset, and well, this is the last one, but then of the phase 2, the last one of the technical sessions on specific approaches and methods and techniques based on the identified needs from you. So moving forward, hopefully we can accompany you when you test or roll out some of these approaches and support you in your journey. So I think we can start because we don't have a lot of time. If Jordi and Joseph, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you so much, Valeria. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us in the last pill of this journey on adaptive evaluation. I mean, yeah, we've been, I think it's, at least for us, extremely interesting journey because adaptive evaluation is something new. It's a field that is emerging, as you know, because evaluations happen in increasingly complex environments. And Jordi, Valeria, and I, that exercise allowed us to explore, you know, what adaptive evaluation means. It's something that we are co-creating together with other people that are in the field. And it also allowed us, you know, to touch base with what it means to be an evaluator in that context. And especially this field today is about that. So we are gonna talk about the software of the mind. We are gonna specifically touch upon what is evaluative thinking and why evaluative thinking is important in the context of adaptive evaluations. And based and highly related to an evaluative thinking, we're gonna speak about which mindset actually backs up this evaluative thinking from an adaptation point of view. So those will be the main 2 areas we'll cover up today, and we will wrap up with evaluability assessments, which is also something that you don't exclusively do in adaptive evaluations, but that in adaptive evaluation context, it's fundamental. So Jordi, and next one, thank you. We have here again a reminder of the 8 compass, which is actually the frame that allowed us to experiment and set up these adaptive evaluation pills. You know that in the frame of the compass, the program cycle also changes. So it's no longer sequential, in which we design, we implement, and we monitor and evaluate after implementation. But M&E actually happens also along implementation, so that we are able to capture what is changing and actually provide those feedback as evidence for decision making during the implementation and even after the implementation of the program to feed next designs of potential sequences of program design. So you have here the 4 drivers. The 8 compass is the adaptive management model in UNFPA. UNFPA has been a pioneering agency on adaptive management. You know that the whole international development sector or field is moving towards adaptive management in different speeds at different levels and with different conceptual understanding. Adaptive management through the 8 compass is the one issued by UNFPA, who has been the first UN agency to move towards adaptive management specifically. And adaptive management is an approach based on collective inquiry that uses time reaction through information about the present, the past, and the future. So it means that in a present moment, it may look retrospectively in order to capture evidence of how the programs or interventions have worked in the past, but also it looks forward, trying to capture narratives about potential scenarios that will happen in the future so that this information also fits into the decision-making process. And an example that you have had recently are the 4 scenarios that have been developed by UNFPA for that, and that were an input for the new strategic plan. So adaptive evaluation actually features evaluation approaches that happen in that context of adaptive management. And that includes tools, methodologies, or approaches that really can enhance adaptability and learning, which is key for adaptability, in evaluations that are conducted in complex environments. So that's the setting. That's the setting. We are in PIL number 6. Some of you that have been also accompanying us in the last 5 PILs, now we have a record of several approaches and methodologies that we call them adaptive evaluation. And you have here a summary, a quick recap of what we have covered so far. We started with methodologies to foster evaluation use. So utilization focused evaluations frame actually the scope of adaptive evaluations. Then we moved towards seeing methods for learning and adaptation in real time within that frame. And we actually explore 4 methodologies here. And then we continued with methods to capture complexity. So those adaptive evaluations are evaluations that happen in complex environments. So how to capture these complexities of the essence. And we also saw 3 methodologies here. Then we continued by exploring methods to capture contribution. Unpredictability is a main characteristic of complexity, of complex environments. So, and a major challenge for evaluations are actually how we measure the contribution of our program into those outcomes that we are trying to assess. And we saw here a couple of methodologies that can help us in doing so. And last PIL, we saw the leadership roles in adaptive evaluation. Adaptive evaluation, there's a proactive role by all stakeholders involved primarily in those evaluations. So we explore the different roles of the different stakeholders. And we also explore some methodologies that can allow us actually to identify and to discuss those leadership roles among stakeholders. And here we are in PIL number 6, which today we entitled that session Adaptive Evaluation Mindset, where we will explore the soft part of the evaluator, of the evaluation manager, of those people that, deal with evaluation at the forefront. And then we will wrap up with evaluability assessments that are a tool that are also very important when we talk about adaptive evaluation, and we will also explain why we consider that. So Jordi, over to you.
Yep, so let's start with evaluative thinking. Evaluative thinking is an element, as we will see right now, that is fundamental in evaluation, as evaluation is understood in UNFPA, and that then, in the case of adaptive evaluation, is absolutely of the essence. If you look at the evaluation strategy, UNFPA evaluation strategy, evaluative thinking is mentioned actually in several places. We have chosen 2, which I think were very significant, because evaluative thinking in the strategy plays a role, or 3 roles, is a key factor to learn and adapt. So there is a link between applying evaluative thinking, which we will see what it includes in a minute, and learning and adapting. So we learn and adapt if we apply an evaluative thinking. Also, it is mentioned in the strategy that in order to deliver the strategic plan, we do need evaluative thinking. And then it also mentions the strategy that UNFPA conceives evaluative thinking as a driver to transform the organization. Actually, we have chosen these 2 paragraphs. And the first one on the left, it says that these global development accords demand constant learning and adaptation, which means that evaluative thinking should be embedded into strategic dialogues, decisions on programming, positioning in order to respond to the complex environment. So actually it understands evaluative thinking not only as an element, as a DNA for evaluators and for the evaluation function, but evaluative thinking as a way of approaching wider processes like strategic dialogues and decisions on programming as well. And that is where we can see that evaluative thinking is a crucial aspect of adaptive management and therefore of adaptive evaluation. The document, the UNFPA strategy, evaluation strategy, also mentions that what this strategy looks for is to evolve from addressing problems only right? Like problem solution type of linear thinking into improving systems and transforming UNFPA, the organization, through evaluative thinking and developing a culture of evaluation. So here there is an implicit theory of change, is that according to UNFPA evaluation function, developing evaluative thinking will help to develop a culture of evaluation that could transform the organization, because evaluative thinking is crucial in order to go forward with the strategic dialogues and programming in a way that we can effectively and efficiently solve complex development challenges. So evaluative thinking is one of the pillars. It's a very intangible thing, but we will now break it down. We will see what do we mean by evaluative thinking and what are the main elements and what are the skills beyond evaluative thinking. So here we have chosen a number of definitions because there is quite a lot written about what evaluative thinking is. Those writing about it, essentially evaluators that write about evaluation, and also researchers. So here we have a number of definitions, and we can extract the main elements of adaptive evaluative thinking based on those definitions. We see that evaluative thinking, for example, for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, is defined as critical thinking. That's an element of evaluative thinking, which is applied in the context of evaluation. So when we apply critical thinking in evaluation, that is an element of evaluative thinking. It's motivated by inquisitiveness and a belief in the value of evidence. That's another pillar of evaluative thinking. It's the value of evidence is another key characteristic. So basing findings and then later on decisions on evidence rather than on just impressions or ideology. And then it involves identifying assumptions and posing thoughtful questions. So asking questions that are thoughtful, the how this works, what worked, what didn't work, for whom, under what circumstances, why did it work in this context and not in that other context. These are the type of thoughtful questions that they refer about. So it's about, they're not questions about only whether these work. They are deep, thoughtful questions about whether what we thought would work is working and not, and the reasons why. Baker and Brunner, researchers and evaluators in 2012 said, well, it's a type of reflective practice. So evaluative thinking, it's reflective practice. As you remember, in the A Compass, we have the A Compass, it's about learn to adapt, and it's about pausing and reflect. In the A Compass, you have these adaptive moments, which are essentially moments in we pause and do reflective practice. So evaluative thinking is embedded in those adaptive moments, because actually evaluative thinking is reflecting about practice. It's also about integrating systematic questioning, about asking what is happening, what are the implications, what are we going to do about it. So systematic questioning, reflecting, using evidence, posing questions, and being critical are aspects of evaluative thinking. Also, Archibald, another evaluator and researcher, wrote in 2013 that is an attitude. So evaluative thinking is an attitude, and attitudes depend on ourselves, on who we are, what we value, our beliefs, and our values, actually. So it's an attitude. We will talk more about that, how to foster this attitude. It's not only a process. It's not a step 1, step 2, step 3, do this. It's an attitude towards doing something. Again, a belief in the value of evidence. Yeah? So when we take decisions, when we do inquiries based on evidence, that is essential for evaluative thinking. And then Archibald says that it involves skills. Okay, so this is a way of grounding it. Evaluative thinking, it's not only about thinking frameworks and going around ideas, but it's also about having skills. And he defines identifying assumptions, posing thoughtful questions, pursuing deeper, and making informed decisions when preparing for an action. All these are skills that can be built upon. We have other definitions, more definitions about what it is. Bennett and Gesani in 2011 says, well, it's about questioning, reflecting, learning, and modifying, conducted all the time. If you look at these words, making questions, what, so what, now what, reflecting, you learn, and then you modify, and therefore adapt, that's pure adaptive management. And when you do it all the time, it's 100% adaptive management. So actually, evaluative thinking is DNA for adaptive management. Yeah, and it says also, Bennett and Jasani said, it's a state of mind within an organization's culture. So here again, evaluative thinking behind culture, behind the state of mind of those in organizations. Michael Quinn-Patton, a very renowned evaluator and collaborator of UNFPA, he wrote in 2005, there is an analytical way of thinking that infuses everything that goes on. So it's not only, it's a way of thinking that it's absolutely in everything that we do. It is not only in evaluation, but in all types of decisions and management processes and programs that we do. Oliver, we're very happy to see you after so many years.
Oh, hi there. Hi.
Yes. Hi.
Hi
How are you?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure seeing you here. So evaluative thinking, this has to be clear, it's not the same as evaluation. Yeah, it infuses evaluation throughout, but evaluation, we should differentiate the two. Evaluation is about doing, yeah, about the steps and the processes that we implement when doing an evaluation, whereas the evaluative thinking is about being. It's about a state of mind. It's about thinking. It's about how we approach the process. And this is something that depends on us, on evaluation managers, on program managers, on senior managers, on M&E officers. So that's the thing. We have been talking in all these fields, throughout these 5 fields, a lot about adaptive evaluation and methods and the how we do it. And this is about who we are when doing it. This is a very important thing. So remember, the activity is evaluation, and the way of thinking, values, attitudes, that is evaluative thinking. That's what it embeds. Okay, so why is evaluative thinking important for adaptive evaluation? The idea is because it incorporates the essence, as we said, of adaptive management and applies it to evaluation. Okay, so when it comes to adaptive evaluation, evaluative thinking is absolutely of the essence. We could say that there's no adaptive evaluation without really evaluative thinking. What does that include? Here are a few keywords that we salvage from the different definitions that we gave you in the previous slide. Reflecting, pause and reflect, reflective practice, systematic questioning, posing thoughtful questions, making decisions based on evidence, analyzing the implications of the data that we accrued or the situation that we see. This is why in the compass we have the what, so what, now what framework in adaptive moments. That so what is about analyzing implications. We look at what is happening and then we analyze, okay, so what does that mean for us, for our target groups, for our partners, for our stakeholders? Also, it is about learning and modifying, yeah, learning and adapt, and about deep understanding. And all these elements, these 6 elements here, they are absolutely the essence of adaptive management. And they are all elements of evaluative thinking. Therefore, evaluative thinking is at the heart of adaptive management. Evaluative thinking includes or combines several types of thinking. Okay, this is in the video that we sent you for the preparation materials for this PIL. You have a video from Michael Quinn-Patton. It's a 4-minute video, and he talks about evaluative thinking, and he breaks it down into 4 types of thinking. There is also several articles written about this: critical thinking, creative thinking, practical thinking, and inferential thinking. And we would like to give you those main elements. So we now break down evaluative thinking into the different components that it has. So evaluative thinking has to do with being critical, thinking in a critical manner, critical thinking. And that has several elements. Questioning assumptions, that's the first thing. And here when we say assumptions, these are the assumptions in your theory of change. And the theory of change, you know, we have outcomes, activity, outputs, and assumptions. And essentially assumptions are how we think things work and why we do what we do. This is an assumption. We do what we do because we think that will render or result in a number of aspects. So questioning assumptions is saying, okay, what are we doing what we're doing? Is being that critical, yeah, rather than assuming that this is the way things are done and have been done for a long time, is questioning those assumptions. It also has to do with looking for disconfirming evidence, not only evidence, looking at the evidence that something is happening, but also looking at, okay, do we have any disconfirming evidence? Because maybe that works in some cases and not in others. That is being critical, applying critical thinking. Very related to this, examining rival explanations. Maybe we have in an evaluation a very clear explanation that we contributed to a particular outcome, but maybe others have also contributed to that particular outcome, or there is a rival explanation. We're not clear about whether it has been us or others. Being that critical in analyzing the different pathways of change, that is part of critical thinking. Seeking diverse perspectives as well, it's part of being critical. Yeah? Maybe perspectives that challenge our views on a particular situation, and then analyzing this what and how we think and why we think that way. That is being self-critical. Okay, so stopping and say, okay, why do we think this way? What are the assumptions behind and why? Creative thinking has to do with, this is in the words of Michael Quinn-Patton, using evocative visualization techniques to analyze and present findings and presentations. So it's about being creative when we collect the data, when we evaluate. It also has to do with trying to search for coherence. When you are evaluating and you look for findings, you try to look for coherence because you want to tell a story, right? When we evaluate, we want to tell a story of what worked and why it worked and why it was successful. And often we come across contradictory evidence. Usually things work in particular contexts and they don't work in others. And that's contradictory evidence. And there is, evaluators, we tend to feel uncomfortable in front of the ambiguity and the uncertainty. There is ambiguity. The finding is not clear. There's no conclusive evidence. Evidence goes in different ways. And there is uncertainty. We cannot really say that this is working well or not. And that creates a certain sense of comfortability. We feel uncomfortable. So actually creative thinking is about opening up in that regard and feeling comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. We will see some techniques. Later on, Joseph will tell us about it on how to achieve that state of mind. And then, of course, allow and invite outside of the box perspectives and interpretations of the data. And also when we come up with recommendations, creative thinking is fundamental. Think about outside of the box. So getting perspective of other actors and stakeholders that can open up our way of thinking. So two pillars of evaluative thinking are critical and creative thinking. There are another two that Patton mentions and writes about. Practical thinking, it's very important for evaluative thinking. It's not theoretical thinking. Evaluative thinking is about integrating theory and practice and examining the real-world implications of the findings and the conclusion. Because the idea is that they will be used by somebody in order to make a decision. And that is thinking practically. What are the implications practically of those conclusions that we are coming up out of when we answer the evaluation questions? Inviting interpretations from non-evaluators and non-researchers as well, in order to get their practical views and to help us with our thinking. And inferential thinking has to do with all the pathway as evaluators that we do between pieces of evidence, right? Between the pieces of evidence and our findings and conclusions. It has to do with the reasoning. Yeah. So actually, to what extent the evidence supports the conclusion? Because what we get in an evaluation is evidence, but then we make conclusions out of it. We say, okay, based on this evidence, we conclude that this is working well or not. And it's that pathway that has to do with inferential thinking. Also, the reasoning, to do rigorous logic reasoning in that link between evidence, findings, conclusions, and then later on recommendation. That is the part, the inferential thinking. So we have then that evaluative thinking includes critical thinking, creative thinking, practical thinking, and inferential thinking. Is all these together, breaking it down. To finalize, how can we foster evaluative thinking in our organization? As we saw, UNFPA evaluation strategy is a lot about fostering evaluative thinking. Research, and Michael Quinn-Patton in that video that we presented to you mentions that research on evaluation, so research on the impact of evaluations, tells us that the main impact of evaluations, excuse me, are the production, of course, of evaluation findings. But then the second biggest impact is engaging people who participate in evaluative thinking. So that is what has a lot of impact in organizations, not only the conclusions of the evaluations, but the fact that you engage those around the evaluations, stakeholders, primary intended users, secondary users in the evaluation. That has the biggest impact. So actually evaluations have an impact when you engage those around it in evaluative thinking, which means in critical thinking, posing questions, in creative thinking, asking their opinions, making them part of this evaluative thinking process and all these 4 pillars. Actually, evaluating thinking, according to research, generates an evidence-based decision-making culture. And this is exactly what the evaluation strategy wants from the evaluation function in UNFPA. Therefore, fostering evaluative thinking is absolutely of the essence in order to achieve that. Research also tells us that the ultimate results of this process is organizational learning. Those organizations that have an evaluative thinking state of mind, they learn what works, what doesn't work, because they're inquiring and getting evidence all the time. And we also, the last thing that Michael Quinn-Patton mentions and that we think is very useful to put forward is that we learn organizationally, we learn through interacting to one another, not just listening, doing training courses. It's about interacting to one another. So engaging those in evaluations, that's what prompts this evaluative thinking and learning about evaluative thinking. The first pill that we did on the use of evaluation and engagement, in that one, we talked a lot about how to engage users and stakeholders in evaluations. Now we would like to open a little bit for discussion. Yeah, after we have seen, we're sure that most of you have heard about what evaluative thinking is. Now we have put the focus on that. We would like your views and your experience, actually, rather than your views, on examples of evaluative thinking being applied in your office, yeah? Either inside the M&E function or outside. Actually, what would be interesting for us, we think, we did this session for the Asia region this morning, early this morning, and the focus was more on outside the M&E function, because that's when evaluative thinking transcends the evaluation function. And when you think about examples, think about what made that possible. Yeah? So that example of evaluative thinking, whether it was creative thinking, critical thinking, inferential thinking, have you seen program managers and senior managers applying evaluative thinking? And if so, in that particular example, what made that possible? And what do you think that stood in the way? And when you do that reflection, in order to help you out, here we have a screenshot of the Michael Patton's video on the main elements that he understands are included in evaluative thinking. So anybody, the floor is yours now. Anybody would like to share your experience with evaluative thinking within M&E function, or if at all possible, outside the M&E function? And reflect a bit about what made it possible. What do you think are the drivers or the enabling factors for evaluative thinking to flourish, and the factors that might stand in the way? The floor is yours. You can just raise your hand or unmute your mic and share your view. Yes, Lucas? Hello, thanks.
Yeah, thank you
floor.
very much. Yes. Yes, I think this is a very critical element of the organization and also the country offices, because it enables us to reflect and also to record accurately what we are doing in terms of the programs that we are doing in the country offices. I think the key part that I'm taking here is that the operative word is that you have a critical thinking that takes through, that you have to go through. And if that is actually done collectively by all the offices in the country office, it makes everyone to realize that we have actually looked at what we are achieving in a sense that that has enabled us to know what works and what doesn't work, and why those things are working or why they're not working. And then also look at the other elements that are surrounding some of those things, because we are able to actually get to the assumptions, the risks that have been there, and then we get a bigger picture, and then we start to actually learn and also adapt the program according to what we are seeing on the ground. So it means we learn, we become smarter in terms of how we are doing the program, and we also become smarter in terms of the results that we achieve, because we are documenting everything. So this evaluative thinking makes the process of storing our knowledge and for the future a better way. It means we sort of become like the artificial intelligence of the organization, because we have actually started thinking of how we can actually preserve what we are learning, either it is good or it is bad. So I think maybe that's how I can actually highlight what I'm seeing, what I'm getting from this. And it's something that is already happening in country offices. It's just that we need to always intensify it and do it in a way that is coordinated, so that it becomes easier to sort of share across countries and also the organization as a whole. Thank you, and over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Lucas. Actually, I had a question, maybe a little clarification. You mentioned a very interesting point, which is, critical thinking rather than individually, collectively, right? So you emphasized at the beginning of your intervention this collective critical thinking, collective evaluative thinking. Could you share with us some examples of situations in which you have experienced that this evaluative thinking or critical thinking was done collectively, and tell us a bit about what do you think, what made that possible? Because actually that's a critical aspect of evaluative thinking, and then how that affects the organizational culture. So if you could tell us a bit more on that, that would be fantastic.
Yes, sure, Jody. I think what has happened when we were developing the 7-country program in here in Eswatini, we used the tree analysis, or the root cause analysis, to sort of look at the major problems that are affecting the country, but that are within the UNFPA mandate, to sort of try and think of how do we craft a country program that will respond to this. So as we were looking at this critically, it also got us to also look back in terms of what have we done so far? What evidence do we have in terms of things that are working and which are not working, and all those kind of information or evidence that can help us to do better as we start to plan for a new country program. In that way, it led us to think and say, in the 3 transformative results that globally the organization is trying to push, I think the biggest problem that we have is around a high maternal mortality problem that is happening in the country. And we tried to focus on that in terms of what is the problem, what is it that we are doing that, or that we are not doing well, so that we can actually try to change or influence that, and what are the players that are there on the ground that we need to also look or enhance their capacity so that they can make these changes. And all those kind of questions made us to sort of realize that there is a lot of information and gaps that are there, which we can actually try to address. And as the country program is getting implemented, we are focusing in terms of addressing those gaps and bringing in even innovation and all the capacities that can actually change this trajectory. So maybe that's how I can stop for now. Thank you. Back
Yes,
to you.
yes, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Lucas, for answering the questions. I think very interesting reflections. The root cause analysis in the framework of developing the country programs, and applying critical thinking there. Indeed, asking yourself, what is the problem? What are the implications? How can it? That's definitely critical thinking. Anybody else would like to share her? Yes, Steve?
Okay, good evening, Judy and everybody. So I am Tit from Cambodia. I am an analyst. I just would like to share something. I think that there are some elements related to evaluative thinking. So I am an E, but I have been given another, additional duty to manage a migration project, a short one. Due to my, past experience in working on migration. So we got a project about a year working on raising awareness on UNFPA mandates like on sexual reproductive health, on that specifically on family planning, on maternal health, and also GBV. And then under this project, we focus on a number of activities. One is installing audio visual equipment at the border point between Cambodia and Thailand. So at the border point, and then also at the migration reception centers, as well as at one window service offices in the three provinces bordering Thailand. So after a while, that one activity. Second one is we printed out a leaflet containing targeted message to be distributed to the returning migrants. And the third one is we use a social media platform like Twitter and Facebook to post targeted messages as well as video containing messages. So after a while, I talked to my colleague, communications colleague, and I would like to check on the data that the social media platform has reached out to the target group. So when I got the information, I found out that not many people, including my migrant in the three target provinces bordering Cambodia and Thailand, we do not reach many people. And then we discuss and think. So whether our activity or strategies to raise awareness or on the issue effective or not, because we found out that the social media platform, though we learned that many people, including migrants, have used smartphone, but it seemed that we have not reached out with the returning migrants. So we after all this, we may think that if we have the project in the future, we might have to use a different method of reaching out the returning migrants in Cambodia as well as in the destination country like Thailand, in order to make sure that our messages reach the target group. So we have thought of probably using peer education instead of social media and printing leaflet or installing audio visual equipment at the point of entry and return. Thank you.
Okay, okay, thanks so much. So then, so your point is all this experience, all this exposure that you have tell us, to you, it's like, it's an experience of evaluative thinking. Can you tell us a bit like the main aspects, you know, that you can salvage from this experience in terms of evaluative thinking as we explain it? Very, very briefly, because we're running a bit out of time. Hello? Okay, well.
So Judy, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, in brief though, based on the data that we got from our social media campaign, as well as the monitoring visit, we can infer that the intervention or the strategy that we have used to reach a migrant do not seem to work. As a result, in the future, we may have to change. For example, we may have to employ peer education method, either in the both at the community or origin and at the destination point, so that we can reach out to the Cambodian migrants. That's we can think. Yeah, and I hope
Absolutely.
this is related to evaluative
yes,
thinking.
It is. Absolutely, it is. You're talking about, you know, gathering evidence through monitoring systems, then inferring through that evidence that might not be working, and then adapting the strategy in order to be more effective. That's absolutely, that is adaptive thinking, and actually it also has to do not only with evaluative thinking, but also with an adaptive attitude, because you're thinking that maybe you will change or you will adapt the strategy in light of the evidence. So here is where evaluative thinking and the adaptive mindset, they come together. Yeah, maybe it's a good link now here, Joseph, to start talking about adaptive mindset and how the evaluative thinking and the adaptive mindset come together in adaptive evaluation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordi and colleagues. So definitely we decided to include adaptive mindset with evaluative thinking, because evaluative thinking is infused by also a mindset, you know, a series of attitudes towards that infuse that thinking. And having or cultivating an adaptive mindset can actually expand the outreach of the evaluative thinking in evaluations that happen in complex environments, no? Which is actually the framing of the whole adaptive evaluation pills in which we are having these sessions with you. So that could be the context. When we talk about adaptive mindset, next, Jordi, we actually can see that adaptation cannot just be reduced to a set of steps or standardized protocols. So sometimes evaluation is very much, you know, a step by step. It's we can call it following a series of predetermined steps or standardized protocols. So for example, in the way we design an evaluation, then we conduct an inception phase where we collect data in order to design the evaluation. Then we proceed to collect evidence through a data collection process. Then we open the floor for interpreting those findings with the stakeholders. And then we also may come up with actually drafting an evaluation report, discussing that report, and coming up with a management response. So evaluation can be really tailored and explained through a set of steps or protocols. But adaptation cannot just be reduced to this set of steps or standardized protocols, as we have seen actually implicitly in the last pills. Adaptation, first and foremost, is a mindset. What does it mean? It means that it's a way of thinking, evaluatively applied to adaptation, towards rapid and timely decision making when we see things happening, emerging, as we also mentioned in the first pill. It's also a perspective on how the world unfolds, a way to look at the world. It's a world view. And it's also specifically an attitude. It's an attitude towards thriving in an uncertain and rapidly changing world. When we talk about a complex context, we talk also about an unpredictable context. We're talking about evaluating in uncertainty. And sometimes we are prone to resist change. When we have when we talk about having an adaptation mindset, we talk about embracing change as an opportunity, actually, to thrive, to explore opportunities, to explore new ways that are emerging, so that we can capture that, understand that, and manage them. So when we talk about an adaptive mindset, we also can talk about adaptability as agility. And in that way, agility is the ability to change quickly in the face of new changes, new circumstances, new information that we may capture. And this is actually, next, Jordi, how it is also put in the A Compass. We mentioned before that at the beginning of the presentation, that UNFPA developed the A Compass as the adaptive management model in the agency, and it talks about the A mindset. It already emphasizes the importance of developing the A mindset. The A mindset can be adaptive mindset, agile mindset. In that context, we have been mentioning and talking about, and it stands in stark contrast to the bureaucratic mindset, that sometimes we see a lot in our work, even in ourselves, that we comply with what is expected from us, we follow and we play by the book. And an agile mindset instead is about taking a proactive role towards working with each other for impact, towards having an attitude, a proactive attitude towards capturing what is emerging, towards trying to understand and making sense out of the change we see during evaluations. So it supports all elements of the A Compass, actually, towards a set of attitudes. So when we emphasize this attitudinal aspect of the mindset, and here are several attitudes that the A Compass emphasizes. One of them is the respect for diverse contributions, acknowledging, engaging with different perspectives, and honoring different voices. Inclusiveness in collaboration, so trying also to engage with different partners and voices and make sure that we include them in the collaborative efforts, trying to capture the collective intelligence that you mentioned earlier in the conversation. An eagerness to continuously improve, despite we may be proactive in things that are not written or tasks that are not expected from us. Openness to learn, having an ownership for quality, being rigorous about what we do, a focus on impact, as mentioned, and especially this ability to adapt. And all these attitudes here, they reinforce each other. So the A Compass is explicitly mentioning about the advantages of developing an agile mindset. And then the drivers, that the A Compass is based on 4 drivers. You have them here: leadership, collaboration, agility, and learning for adaptation. So when we're talking about mindset, we actually are emphasizing the leadership, taking a proactive role towards engaging, with our own activities, how we can be more adaptive, how we can collaborate to be more adaptive, how can be more agile in decision making, how can we learn along the way, and therefore how we can adapt. So that's the manifesto you have here of adaptation in the A Compass. And the drivers apply to the organization as much as they apply to the individual. They actually start by the individual. And you know that the focus of the A Compass is on people. It starts with the A teams, and the A teams are shaped by individuals. So it starts with the individual, but then it infuses a culture of adaptation across teams and across the organization. So then we may wonder how to cultivate an adaptive mindset in ourselves, especially, and of course in our organization. So adaptive evaluations, as mentioned, happens in complex, turbulent, and predictable contexts. So this is the setting frame in which we cultivate an adaptive mindset. And that really helps us in capturing emergence and respond to emergence. So we cannot approach adaptive evaluation with the business as usual mindset. This is sometimes this is a trap, no? Because I mean, we've been covering and discussing new adaptive evaluation approaches. So if we want to really make a good use and apply the utilization focus principle on adaptive evaluation approaches, we need to cultivate that adaptation mindset. And sometimes this is counterintuitive to this business as usual, because we are often used, you know, to linear types of mindsets, no? More focus on predictions and analysis, predictability. So based on what we have analyzed and we have predicted, we infer a potential future behavior. So sometimes this is the logic that we are used to follow in evaluations also. We cannot fake an adaptive mindset, not in the long run. But changing mindsets is actually not easy, and we cannot tell anyone to change their mindset, right? So here it's important we can discuss, we can see what are the implications of adopting an adaptive mindset, but there's an interesting wealth of knowledge in that case coming from Eastern perennial philosophies or wisdom that can really inspire us in cultivating this adaptive mindset. To Jordi and I and Valeria, we have been discussing this a lot, also with Michael Quinn-Patton, where we had, you know, the opportunity to interact during the results-based management, developmental evaluation. We actually emphasize a lot the aspect of the adaptive mindset in conducting this type of adaptive evaluation approaches. And actually, and here you have a couple of resources we would like to share with you, because there is not much written. You have this couple of resources here, and there's also one recent article that was published in the American Journal of Evaluation that I will mention later on. And so you can see here this is a latest book I published on systems thinking, and there is a chapter, an entire chapter on evaluation, in which Jordi and Michael Quinn-Patton contributed largely. And then Michael Quinn-Patton got engaged with this aspect of how to cultivate an adaptive mindset. And in his latest book called The Blue Marble Evaluation, which is about evaluating systems transformation in complex environments, we organized a webinar where we explored that. And you have the recording also available for you to check if you are interested. Next, Jordi. So here there are mainly, there are, of course, other ways of cultivating an adaptive management and an adaptive mindset, but we would like to focus on 6 specific competencies. The first one, we call it oneness and interbeing. And here we are tapping into this, the wealth of knowledge coming from Eastern philosophies. Oneness on interbeing is about having this clarity, a state of mind, a clear, the clarity that comes out from analyzing, approaching reality from a sense of clarity that makes us see the interconnections between the different elements we are evaluating. It can be a system, it can be a program, it can be an intervention, so that we are clear about the context, the purpose, and the boundaries. So approaching this state of mind, analyzing the interdependencies between the different factors we're trying to evaluate, this in practice, that allows us actually to analyze things not from a linear way, like this is a direct cause and effect from A to B, but more how different elements can reinforce each other. No? For example, in different evaluations, we analyze the impact of climate change, no? And then there's inequality. So we know that climate change, we can provide evidence on how climate change actually increases inequality, but at the same time, inequality is also reinforcing climate change. And we could come up here with, for example, doing systems maps through causal feedback loops that we also explored in the pill number 3. So having that clarity for assessment, how to see reality, how it unfolds from this interbeing or interdependence point of view, can really help us in developing this competency for adaptive evaluation. And of course, approaching our work with compassion and appreciation, with empathy towards the situation, towards the stakeholders, towards the interviewees, towards the roles of the different stakeholders in the evaluation, and towards the opinions of the stakeholders that are involved in the organization and with whom we interact. It's also of the essence in order to create that openness so that people can express their own opinions and the data that we collect is really a good quality data. The second aspect or competency we'd like to mention is about emptiness and the Zen mind. The Zen mind is actually sometimes called also the beginner's mind. So it's approaching things whenever we listen to our interviewees, any process of data in which we are involved is about approaching it by suspending judgment. So by not being so much conditioned by our past expertise regarding that particular topic, sometimes that this may hamper the way our capacity to listen. So this is actually competency that works well for being open for active listening, deep listening, without an unconditioned learning from past experiences. And this requires approaching, the way we ask questions, the way we engage with the stakeholders with humility. So asking questions with this beginner mind can really also help us in capturing what is emerging, in making sense of the change of the data we are hearing and collecting. And therefore, also it increases the quality of the evaluation in which we participate. Active listening, we can apply during an inception phase, during data collection, either in interviews or focus groups, in any opportunity we have to interact with stakeholders. And for doing that, the personal factor, as we saw in the last bill, is of the essence. So we cannot just create a genuine environment where people can honestly share their own opinions and perspective if we don't actually foster the connection, this authentic connection with people beforehand. The third competency here, we call it impermanence. Impermanence is also a state of mind in which we know for sure we have a felt knowing that actually the natural condition of reality is change, so that everything is changing constantly. And this is the natural state of reality. And this is somehow counterintuitive with the most predictive and predictive mindset that we have been used to develop, especially from a Western worldview in that case, and in which we attach and we want to control processes, in that case, a program that has some expected results, and we want to make sure those results are achieved. In a complex context, certain things may happen along the way, and adaptive evaluation can really help us in capturing, in reviewing, in readapting our expectations accordingly. So applying impermanence in adaptive evaluations may really help us, for example, in implement adaptive inquiry frameworks, where we may have initial or departing questions in our inquiry framework. We may include and collect data that may provide certain elements so that we may reframe the questions or even change the questions because we are having new and more relevant data along the way. And for doing that, letting go of this mentality to just that we have to control everything, because there are certain things that are not on our control. And I think that the COVID pandemic was actually a real exercise that made us all become very aware of that impermanence, and that we definitely do not control a lot of the processes that really also influence the way we do our work in evaluation. The next, Jordi. The next would be the yin and yang. The yin and yang is a systemic theory coming from the East that allows us actually to spot the opposites, to understand a phenomenon from different perspectives that can manifest in different ways. And spotting the opposites is a good way also to actually explain how we go through challenges as tensions. So a tension may have two different opposites. And we applied actually creative tensions during the developmental evaluation of RBM. And that may provide, in order to enlarge the scope of the evaluation through the challenges we undergo in the evaluation and in the program we evaluate. For example, one example is the issue of accountability. In evaluation, this is an important criterion, and we always put emphasis on accountability for results. But then we may spot a different polarity of accountability, which is accountability for learning. So it's not just one or the other, but taking into consideration how we can assess accountability for results and also for learning, which are two different but complementary things. Another competency that can be really helpful for practicing and cultivating an adaptive mindset is the Wu Wei. The Wu Wei is also translated as the action of non-action, but in the end, it's more about the term is more about acting according to the natural flow of things. So it's a bit of an art, this one here, but the meaning is a felt knowing, sensing, not trying to force the events too much in order to make them fit our own plans. So following a natural course of action. And for that, it's very important we develop our sensing capabilities. There are, for this, some techniques like mindfulness, like meditation. A recent article published at the American Journal of Evaluation by James Pan precisely talks about the benefits of incorporating mindfulness into our evaluation practice for touching into that insightful type of evaluation. And then we have the five elements is also another systemic methodology, in that case coming from Taoism, which really allows us to actually capture what is generating, what is driving that reality, the generators of that reality. Sometimes in a complex environment, it may be difficult to explain how reality unfolds, but then we may focus on what are the drivers behind those elements that explain how reality works. Evaluation is actually about capturing and exploring reality through an evidence-based information process. And when we use the systemic methodologies, we may see what can really generate the reality we are trying to see or that we are capturing. And this can be really useful in the context. For example, we have different exercises for doing that. And one of them is doing a system map through a causal feedback loop, in which we spot elements and the relationships between those elements. And this one is very much related to the interdependence competency that we have seen. Those would be 6 competencies to develop that can really help us in cultivating an adaptive mindset. And in the end, an adaptive evaluator knows that things will change because there is emergence. So the evaluator really, the main task of an adaptive evaluator is actually to enable an environment to create the conditions for that emergence, so that this emergence is captured. It's also understood. We have to make sense of that emergence in the context of our evaluation of the program we are evaluating, and therefore it can be managed and translated into the decisions that are made for adaptation and for being and staying relevant and effective with our programs. Jordi, I don't know whether you'd like here to tap.
Maybe just a very practical consideration that is, and that's something that I've learned from you. Joseph had the chance of living in Korea for many years, so he got in touch there with Buddhism and all these principles, which are essentially universal principles, but very practically applications. When we learn to adapt, has to do a lot with letting go of control. And here what I mean is, and I'm talking about myself, I come from a world in which when you have an idea or you come up with a plan, you develop a sense of attachment to that idea. So that was the idea that we had. It can be your idea or your team idea, but you get attached. There is an attachment to that idea. This is the plan. This is what we wanted to do. Let's do it. And then things change, and maybe you need to adapt, but adapting means having to change your plan, and you feel attachment to that idea. And that is where, at the personal level, I think that then adaptation is a little bit difficult, and letting go of control, and that can be practiced. That can be practiced. How you let go of control, how you let go, how you detach from those ideas, from those plans. I think, to me, it's a precondition, that allows us to adapt. If we are attached to our plans and we feel we are attached to our ideas from day one, it is very difficult to adapt. We will always find a way through using reasoning to convince others that there's no need to adapt, even to convince ourselves that there's no need to adapt. So that's the first thing. And then the Wu Wei, please go with the flow and do not try to force events. When the Wu Wei is applied, what you find is that you are in a better position to capture emergence, things that are happening around you that might imply that you need to adapt. You see, if we don't go with that flow, And again, that's linked to control. And we are attached to the way we're doing things. It's very difficult to see that something is emerging that might need you to react to that. You see, because then we are biased by our initial idea and we don't see the rest. So I really think that in evaluation, these principles that come from ancient Eastern philosophy, they have a really, really very practical application. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Jordi. And here you have also, for the ones that are interested in that perspective, in exploring, this Eastern paradigm of evaluation, you have here an article published by Craig Rousson in a journal of evaluation called An Eastern Paradigm of Evaluation. And also Craig Rousson makes the case of how this Eastern paradigm can actually help us in developing more and being more adaptive in the way we evaluate. And it's not just, it's the way we actually tap into this wealth of knowledge from the East is not an alternative to the Western way we have to evaluate. Actually, evaluation is a practice that is actually coming from the West. So it's more a complementary way in which we tap into both as assets, both, streams of knowledge as assets that can really reinforce each other in a symbiotic way. So for those interested on this, you have here direct access to the article in order to keep up exploring with this Eastern kind of paradigm. And finally, we would like also now to open the floor. And because when we are talking about mindset, this is about the personal factor, is about which leadership position, which leadership stance we take ourselves. So we'd like to actually open a discussion here, honest discussion on to what extent do you see yourself as having an adaptive mindset. We would also like to hear some suggestions if you have also other ways, that you actually do in order to cultivate such a mindset, so that we can also share and learn from each other. And then which adaptive mindset characteristics, skills do you already see in you? And which ones do you think you should develop? So we would like to, those are two initial inquiries. We'd like to open up a bit of a discussion with you. So please, mute yourself and take the floor. Yes, Lucas.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jody and Joseph. I think for me, yes, I see myself as having an adaptive mindset because the situation on the ground demands that you find that you start with the evaluation, thinking that this is how we are going to approach it and eventually get the results according to the guidebook that Evaluation Office gives us. But as you craft the terms of reference, assemble the teams to actually do the evaluation, that's when you start realizing that things are slightly changing on the ground. They are moving faster, but what is important is to document and also get the required authorization so that you can actually change and adapt accordingly. I think that's the important part, not to deviate without actually engaging all the relevant people that needs to be consulted and also to guide us. So I've seen situations where you find that the lack of maybe consultants in country would have always said, we're looking for people that are in the evaluation database so that they can help us. But you find that there are some others that are just emerging and have a lot of information and the local content with them. So you find that it becomes easy to use them because in the context of what we are trying to evaluate, they have a better understanding of what we are trying to collect. And the internationals that we are engaging are just them as safeguards compared to the one that is local. So you end up saying, I'm suggesting that the team comprises of also these kinds of locals who are going to actually do the work in a competent way, in a way that will be independent, but still very informative, because they will still ask those critical and deeper questions that you wouldn't have asked if you are not from that context. So maybe that's how I can actually say those are the things that I've seen in terms of us being adaptive and using that kind of skills that are here. Thank you, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. If you allow me a question, what is the quality that you really appreciate the most for having an adaptive mindset?
I think I appreciate a number of this, especially when you are able to see the opposites in terms of where things stand. So if you are able to see that and then try to fit in so that you can actually get the results that you are trying to look for. Because ultimately, for me, the most important thing is that we should be able to read the situation and then eventually get the results that we are trying to get. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucas. Is there anyone who would like also to share, what the adaptive mindset attitudes or skills are important according to you? Yes, Jean, please, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to make a contribution that recently in our country office, we now have an RBM self-assessment. So the country office did a self-assessment, and the self-assessment was looking at whether we are really doing the monitoring and evaluation. There was a question to do with monitoring and evaluation. And honestly, we really did justice to ourselves. And took a look that we saw that we were not so adaptive. So because of that too, we are looking at, even when we get evidence, we have data. How have we adapted? How have we reacted to the data? So whether you have experience or not, but we are supposed also to be using data to inform our decision making. And at that level, whether experience worked, you have to see what the data is telling you, and you should be able to adapt. So that was the direction that the country office is actually taking. But recently, I've also seen that we are also, when we're working with government counterparts, we are also faced with situations where we are supposed to have an adaptive mindset. For example, we recently had data on the trends on maternal mortality, which showed that at least where I come from, I'm in Sierra Leone, that maternal mortality went down in the past decade. And at that point, our government counterparts were saying we need to celebrate. But we looked at the maternal mortality ratio that is there now. It is actually 443 per 100,000. We said, at this level, I don't think there is any need for celebration. But we could not just stop the government. So at that level, with our representative, we decided to say, okay, the minister wants this meeting to celebrate. Why don't we look at it as a way where we can task the government to recommit, to reduce the maternal mortality further, and so they can also understand that they have not reached the target, because the 2030 target is actually 70 per 100,000. So even situations, if you have an adaptive mindset, you can turn something that is a challenge into an opportunity, and be able to still address an issue in a way that is more professional. So I just wanted to add that. So which adaptive mindset characteristic skills do you already see in you? What I see is that I have worked in UNFPA for many years, 12 years, but I've taught myself that things keep changing. And there is technology, there is science, so if you use the experience so much, I will miss opportunity. So whenever there's opportunity for learning, I make sure I'm part of it. That's why I'm also part of this team A learning, because I think experience alone may not work very well in terms of adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. I take here two takeaways from your sharing, which is very relevant. The first is how we engage with data, and this is super important. No, through which process we engage with data, and also how we interact with others in making sense out of this data. And then, in terms of skills and attitudes, the openness to learning, opposed to building up from a strong background of expertise. So very useful. Thank you so much, Jean. Jordi, would you like anything else, or should we move forward for the next
section? Yeah, we have 10 minutes
section
left. Maybe we could present evaluative assessments. Well, but sorry, John has
yes, John.
Okay, sorry, I'm on the move. I hope that you're able to hear me. About the kind of adaptive skills or mindset that for me I take away. I think the example I could give is what transpired yesterday. We are trying to plan for an end-line evaluation for one of the projects. And so we constituted an evaluation reference team, and when the consultants presented, one international, two local. First, we began by saying they should reconstruct the theory of change because of the manner in which it was written earlier on as a narrative, and also present some assumptions that should be tested. And so from the beginning, of course, our mind was to test the theory of change, the inferential mindset that this may have led to the other. But then we started asking ourselves, how can we be sure? How shall we really tell that change has occurred? What assumptions are supposed to be there? So the consultant reconstructed the theory of change, putting a number of assumptions, including the assumption that those interventions should have been delivered, and delivered in the manner in which they were designed, not just completing, but how well. And then they're comparing baseline with end line. And so we're saying that if you compare a girl who was 15 years ago at the beginning, that girl is now 24 years at the end. So you cannot compare 15 years with 15 years. So you should be able to adjust your sampling. Although there was no follow-up of beneficiaries, we need to find a way of identifying some of the beneficiaries who have gone through, so that we can tell for sure that there was a transformation that we can attribute to this this project. And they should have received a minimum dose of this. So how are you going to sample? How are you going to measure? So we started creating the assumptions so that we can be sure. And then as we kept on questioning, we also discovered that new projects came about in the course of the past 4 years in neighboring jurisdiction that could have also caused some contamination. And so how do we tease all this? So we went through a series of brainstorming, which led to a change in the sampling methodology, a change in even some of the tools. And so we're having this back and forth discussion. So it was having that critical mindset in conceptualizing the evaluation design, but also looking at the kind of results we want to see later. And this being an end-line evaluation, we're saying, but what is this for? I think that is now looking at the practical side. the new projects coming are adopting some new models. And we also wanted to show that actually they worked in the ones that we're evaluating so that we can scale them up in the upcoming modalities. So I think those were the sort of mindsets collectively that we had as we were trying to conceive this design. And that was just yesterday. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for sharing this timely information. And I think it's a very good example of how to apply adaptive mindset and evaluative thinking all together, how this makes a symbiosis in order to be more adaptive.
I've gone off. I don't know whether it is my network.
Okay, can you hear us, John? All right. Jordi, are you?
Yep.
Okay, so
if you can stay 5 more minutes, I think that in 10 minutes we can present evaluation.
Sorry, Jordi, sorry, we still have 35 minutes to go.
Ah, sorry. Oh, you're right.
Yes,
it's
because we started at half.
We started
half past.
at half. Oh my God. Okay, so then no need to rush. Absolutely. Okay. Thanks for that.
All right.
Because usually it's from 8 to 10
problem.
New York time. Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay. So then, yes, evaluability assessments. Now we have finished the whole pack of adaptive evaluation, adaptive evaluation methods, tools, and then the mindset. So processes and also mindset. So, and now here to close the circle and go back to square one, where we were in Peel 1, we will talk about evaluability assessments. Evaluability assessments, again, are not something that only happens with adaptive evaluation. Actually, adaptive evaluability assessments, it's a tool that is applied in summative traditional evaluations as well. The thing here, as it happens with evaluative thinking, is that in adaptive evaluation, an evaluability assessment is fundamental. It's extremely important. And we will now try to prove our case, Joseph and I, on the reason why. An evaluability assessment, which they have been in the development sphere for a number of years. An evaluability assessment, according to the OECD Development Aid Committee, is the extent to which an activity or project or intervention or program can be evaluated in a reliable and credible fashion. So the thing is, to what extent something that you want to evaluate is evaluable. And by evaluable, we mean that we can evaluate it credibly and reliably. That is the key point of evaluative assessments. Evaluative assessments, which we will see in a minute what they are about and the different aspects that they cover, may focus on a project or in an intervention, or also in a policy, in a country strategy, in a strategic plan, in a work plan, in a partnership. You can apply to all types of interventions. Actually, the European Commission here in Europe, when they do policy evaluations, they also apply this tool, evaluability assessment. And the reason why evaluability assessments are applied is because evaluability assessments, they look at whether the evaluation will be robust, and they reduce the risk of irrelevant or invalid findings. If something is not evaluable enough, if data is not in place, if the design of what you're doing is not very clear, the risk of coming up with invalid conclusions and invalid findings is very high. So actually, it is a harm mitigating factor. And it also has to do with the principle of proportionality. Evaluations are not free of cost. Yeah? So, and they have to be proportional to what you get out of them. So you put all that money into the evaluation in order to learn, in order to get evidence and data for decision making, right? Now, if you spend all that money and then that particular intervention is not evaluable because there's still not data on results, or because the organization is not ready to use the findings of the evaluation, and then this evaluation ends up being a document stored on a shelf evaluation, that's unacceptable. And evaluability assessments help you check whether that intervention you want to evaluate is ripe enough in order to get value for money from the evaluation. Another reason why we need evaluability assessments, and this one is very much linked to adaptive evaluation, is because we evaluate in order to learn, to get organizational learning. We want to know what worked, what didn't work, why, how, for whom, under which circumstances or context. In evaluation, we want to know all that. Okay, so in order to know that, in order to get that learning, an intervention has to be evaluable. Because if it's not evaluable, if data is not there, if the organization is not ready for that learning, then that won't happen. Okay, so the idea here is we want that intervention to be ready to extract all that learning so then we can learn and adapt. And an evaluation, if it's not evaluable, it will not generate learning. So that's why they're so important, right? We have to distinguish between evaluation and evaluability assessments. They are very much related because we apply them before an evaluation, but they are not an evaluation, they are an assessment. So it's different to assess evaluability than to conduct an evaluation, right? So an evaluation is to make what you already know. An evaluation is getting the intervention and judging it. Is it relevant? Is it efficient? Is it effective? And you make your assessment. In contrast, an evaluability assessment happens usually before the evaluation, and the objective is that as an output of the evaluability assessment, first of all, you recommend whether we are ready to evaluate, whether that intervention is ready to be evaluated, and whether it's worth it to do it, and how to do it, and whether maybe you might recommend some aspects that can be tweaked in order to make the most of that evaluation. So it occurs before the evaluation and evaluability assessment. There are cases in which when the theory of change or the intervention planning, annual work plans, theory of change, it's very clear, where you have sound monitoring and evaluation systems producing all the data you need, and whether you have a very good stakeholder management, yeah, whether you are very clear about the institutional environment around the evaluation, who are the primary users, you are talking to them. When all that is clear, usually you don't need an evaluability assessment. Yeah, you can go get away without doing one, because actually these aspects, the blue, the orange, and the green, are the main elements of an evaluability assessment. So if that's already in place, you don't need to do that, to do one. Let's see, how does it look like? An evaluability assessment looks at these three aspects that we just mentioned. The first one is the quality of the design. So we check here the adequacy of the theory of change. Yeah. So we want to be clear that there is a clear design, because an evaluation learns about whether what you're doing was effective, was the best thing to do, whether you achieve what you wanted, and whether there are other ways of doing it. Therefore, if what you were trying to do is not clear and we don't have it organized, it's very difficult to evaluate. How can you make questions on whether something has been effective and why, if your assumptions are not clear? It's very, very difficult. So that's the first thing. The second point is clearly to have data. To what extent are the results, the outcomes of your intervention verifiable? So you check whether there is information available. So, you know, evaluation is all about evidence. If we don't have evidence on the outcomes, on the effects of the intervention, the degree of evaluability goes down. And the third thing that evaluability assessments look at is to what extent the institutional context is conducive to that evaluation. And here the institutional context is, okay, is the institutional context supporting that evaluation? And that support has several aspects. The main one is use. Will it be useful? Are there primary intended users waiting for that evaluation to happen in order to use the results? That is crucial for adaptive evaluation. You remember in pill number 1, when we started, we talked about user engagement, about utility focused evaluations. And we said that adaptive evaluation is utility focused. If there is no use, then that's not going to be an adaptive evaluation. Therefore, this aspect is fundamental, the institutional context. And that also has to do whether the evaluation will be feasible, because if the stakeholders around the evaluation, they don't see the value to the evaluation, they think it's not the right time, they don't really want to use it, they don't see the reason why, or they think it will not be credible, then you have a resistance there. So the degree of evaluability is low, therefore value for money will be low. So actually evaluability assessments, traditionally, they look at these 3 pillars. That's why I go back to the previous slide. Last paragraph, if you already have good theory of change, all the data in place, and stakeholder management, which is a mapping of and a relationship with all the institutional context, maybe you don't need an evaluability assessment. If you can say, well, the design is good enough, we are getting data on outcomes, and the institutional context is very conducive to the evaluation, okay, then maybe you don't need to do one, okay? These are the checklists. This is an example of the checklist. Actually, evaluability assessments, they are assessments based on checklists. For each one of these pillars, quality of the design, information availability, and then institutional context, you ask a number of questions. So it's an assessment. It's an assessment. Here you have the sub-questions that are usually included. There are many types of checklists for evaluability assessments. This one that we have put here is the one getting out of the evaluability assessments document from the FCDO, from the British government, which is an important donor for UNFPA. So a few years ago, they looked at all the evaluability assessments that they were doing, and they produced this document with this checklist. So have a look whenever you have time after this course. We're providing more checklists. So this is one of them, but there are many others. But the idea is there are the main pillars, and then you are checking whether all these things are in place for each one of these pillars. Okay, evaluability assessments matter a lot for adaptive evaluations, and we would like to emphasize this. There is a long history of evaluability assessments, but usually they are part of impact evaluations. Impact evaluations are, for example, conducted by the World Bank. The World Bank does a lot of impact evaluations, and IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Impact evaluations are mostly quantitative evaluations. They're quantitative, and they are quite costly. Okay, the financial envelope that you need is quite a lot. Therefore, in order to ensure the principle of proportionality before an impact evaluation, the World Bank and the IFAD, they usually do an evaluability assessment. So there is a guarantee that the results will be credible and reliable given the amount of money that they put into impact evaluations. Impact evaluations need a lot of quantitative data. Usually they are quantitative, like counterfactual. They use difference in difference, all these statistical based methods. So they need a lot of data. And as you have seen, it's one of the pillars. Design, data, and then. But what are they so important in adaptive evaluations? Are they important for adaptive evaluations? Our answer is clearly yes. They are very, very important for adaptive evaluations. Why? Because when you look at the three pillars of evaluability assessments, if you compare them with adaptive evaluations, what you see is without a clear intervention model, without a clear theory of change that tells you how are you going to tackle the underlying problem? Yeah, you do the root problem analysis, and then you create your theory of change on how you're going to solve that. Without that, it's very difficult to learn lessons about how your intervention worked. If you're not clear about your intervention, about what the outcomes were, what the activities were, what the assumptions were, how can you learn about what worked and what didn't work? So that's why it's so important to be clear about, have a clear design when it comes to adaptive evaluations, because adaptive evaluations are about learning to adapt. So we cannot learn if the intervention is. Just wait a second, because I have a problem with that. Okay, can you hear me, Joseph? Does it work? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Jordi.
Okay, so then the other thing. So the other thing is to manage adaptively. Yeah. Also for adaptive management, it's all about learning, right? Adaptive management is all about learning. Therefore, we really need to know whether we can learn. And for that, we need to have a very good design. Otherwise, we cannot take the most of adaptive evaluations. Available information. Well, if there's no data on outcomes, there's no credible evaluation. It doesn't matter whether that is a developmental evaluation or a summative evaluation or country program evaluation. So that aspect is fundamental also for adaptive evaluations. We need the data. And then the institutional context, as we said, the institutional context tells us about the conduciveness to use the evaluation. If there's no use, there's no adaptive evaluations, there's no developmental evaluations, there's no outcome harvesting. They are all utility focused. That's why it is so important. It is so important for adaptive evaluations to do evaluability assessments. When do we conduct evaluability assessments? In most of the cases, we do it before the evaluation. And this is the two circles that you have here. Just prior to the evaluation, first, to decide whether you should evaluate, or maybe there is a recommendation not to evaluate, and then to inform the design of the plant evaluation. Once you look at the quality of the design, the data available, and the institutional context, then you can inform the design. And inform the design means deciding about the methods, given, okay, it's evaluable. Yes, it is evaluable. So given the type of design, given the data we have available, and given the institutional context, should we do a developmental evaluation, outcome harvesting, strategy testing, real-time evaluation? And then you think about what particular evaluation method. And it is there, thinking about that you can then apply the fidelity challenge, for example, that we saw already in PIL number 2 for developmental evaluations. But usually evaluability assessments are done prior to the evaluation. Here, in this piece of work on evaluability assessments for impact evaluation developed by the Overseas Development Institute in London, they also say that you can actually use evaluability assessments also to ensure the quality of your M&E system and to ensure the quality of your design. So even when you're not evaluating, and you don't have to evaluate, you can go, and if you let me now, if you allow me, I'm going to go back. You can go to this checklist. The first checklist is about the quality of the design, and the second one is about the information availability. So even when you're designing, when you're developing your theory of change, you can go and do this quality check on your theory of change, on your design, to see whether it's clear, whether it's plausible, whether it's a valid and reliable design, whether it's testable. So that will increase the quality of your design and will make your intervention more evaluable in the future. And the same thing with M&E. You have your M&E system, and you can start asking all these questions. You see, is there data being collected for all the indicators? The critical data is available or not? Whether data is gender disaggregated? You ask already all those questions when you're designing your M&E system to ensure that later on you can evaluate that intervention. But that would be using evaluability assessments at the design stage, which are the two, the blue circles. In most of the cases, and for us as evaluators, we will do evaluability assessments to decide whether the evaluation should take place and to inform the design of the evaluation. Okay. Now we have several resources here to look at after this session. The one that we already mentioned from the FCDO, the previous DFID, the UK government, on evaluability assessments and how they are done. This one that we just presented, evaluability assessments, this is for impact evaluation, but the checklist may be also useful for you. There is also a section on evaluability assessment in the Better Evaluation website of the Global Evaluation Initiative. You have all here the links with the direct access. And then we also chose a few from the UN system. So you have here the evaluability assessment template for the UNODC. They have been doing evaluability assessments actually for quite some time. So you have the term, the main template, and then all the checklists are included in this document. You just have to click the link. Also, UNICEF in 2019, they developed this guidance note for conducting evaluability assessments in UNICEF, and they also have checklists that you can use and get inspired from. And then the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, the UNSDCF, also prioritizes evaluability assessments. So you have this document that you can access directly on how to do evaluability assessments when assessing the cooperation framework in countries. So actually, this is something that the UN values a lot, because it has to do with the principle of, well, proportionality. We spend money when we evaluate in order to make sure that we will learn out of it. And it's also about the credibility of evaluations and robustness of evaluations, and spending money wisely when we do evaluations, making sure that we can get the most of our evaluation. You also have these, there are terms of reference on the UN Women are also using evaluability assessments. And in some cases, they hire out the evaluability assessment to external contractors. And you can find these examples there elsewhere. You just have to Google UN Women terms of reference for an evaluability assessment. They are all openly online, and you can share them. So this is what an evaluability assessment is. As we said, evaluability assessments can be applied to all types of evaluation. And actually, the UN system applies it to summative evaluation, to country strategies, and to strategic plans. They already do that. Joint programs, for example, the joint programs that you have with UNICEF on child marriage or FGM, these big evaluations, they all include an evaluability assessment before you start the evaluation to make sure that the program is ripe enough, mature enough in order to make the evaluation. So it is already happening. The thing is that when you want to conduct an adaptive evaluation, it's even more important. In adaptive management, it's even more important because we want to learn in order to adapt. And if the design is not clear, data is not in place, and there's no conducive attitude to use the results, then there won't be learning. Therefore, the evaluation will not be really an adaptive type of adaptive evaluation. Just to wrap up, we would like to hear your views on that, whether you have come across on evaluability assessments, what are your views on evaluability assessment, whether you think they are worth conducting them, if you have conducted them, or maybe there would be, or maybe not, and what are your points about it. So yes, the floor is open. Please unmute yourselves and share your views. Yeah, Tiff, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jody. Actually, I have never had any experience in conducting evaluability assessment. However, I think it's very important to conduct either at the beginning of the implementation of a strategy or project, or before we start implementing or we start the conducting the evaluation. Because if you don't do it, you may end up having an evaluation which is not usable and then not reliable, and then people will not use it. So that's one thing. And to me, the second question regarding it was conducting, yeah, I already said it was conducting, but I feel that evaluability assessment does not require a lot of resources. That though I have never had any experience. So to me, it was doing it internally or externally. It depends on our time, but it should be a must. It should be a required for any project or program that it should be an compulsory element. That's all from me. And at the same time, I have a question. So for UNFPA, you just presented the checklist from DFAT, from UNODC, from UNICEF, from UN Women, from UNEG, evaluation group. But I have not seen one from UNFPA, but you know which one UNFPA has used. Thank you. That's all from me, Judy.
Yes, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Very interesting to hear your views about, evaluability assessments. We know that there have been some evaluability assessments. I mean, the ones that we know, and it's a pity that Valeria had to jump to another meeting because she's the insider in the evaluation office, and she knows about that. Maybe Taranga, that raised his hand, has also to add as well. But what we have seen is for the joint programs, there are evaluability assessments, and you have already a template, which is shared with UNICEF. But the thing is that UNICEF, they have their guidelines, so then you adapt them in order to do the evaluability assessments. But for specific country offices, as far as Joseph and I know, we're not aware of any evaluability assessment guides or that have been produced by the evaluation office. We know that the evaluation office is quite keen on evaluability assessments and on working on that because of all the benefits that you just mentioned, but we're not aware of any guide or guidance written down already on that. Taranga, a pleasure having you here. Please take the floor.
Yes, I agree with you, Jordi. And first of all, thank you so much for both of you doing excellent. I was just learning, listening and learning. So yeah, my understanding, we don't have, I have not seen except these big programs, big evaluations that we have done anything on evaluability assessment. And this is something we are thinking about as part of the new RBM handbook. My question is very much linked to that. I was trying to see whether we should combine evaluability assessment, because we see the readiness is really critical with the midterm review, or at the beginning of, because we are developing some guidance for midterm reviews of country programs, annual reviews. So we are trying to like unpack a little bit more on that before developing the RBM handbook. I was trying to see whether we should, is there any, in terms of the timeline of evaluability assessment, in terms of the process, is there any evidence to show that we should really do this at this stage, and that would help us bring in more, more utilization, more like people have more time to correct the things, more corrective action. Like, is there any, is it doing it at the midpoint or doing it at the beginning? So what I know UNICEF done evaluability assessment for their strategic plan. UNICEF team came to us. We had a meeting last week, and because we are in the first year, after first year implementation of the strategic plan, they have done the evaluability assessment, and the receiving side is not happy, right? The people who are really developing the strategic plan, they were not happy. They said this was not really the time, and they came up with some bunch of recommendations which are not really, we just started developing I think some tension, maybe something went wrong during the process in terms of, I see, but they did not, but there was no ownership on UNICEF on the receiving end about the assessment. So the couple of questions is the timeline. Is there any evidence from what some of this, like what would be the best time, or maybe combining it with another midterm review process or something like that would bring extra benefit to the organization? And we were just thinking, can this be mandatory if we simplified it, right, as an internal? So because the cost factor is a very big problem in UNFPA, we will not be able to hire another consultant to do evaluability. I don't think, very unlikely such things are happening in UNFPA. It has to be something driven by a many officer internally as together. So what extent the independence really matters here, and can we think about some simplified version of it, and give a recommendation for every country to do that as part of a learning. Sorry for packing a couple of questions, but this is really critical for us in terms of since we are developing about the policy and everything. This needs to be part of it, I think. Over to you. Thank you.
Nope, actually, spot on questions, Taranga, as usual. I'm not sure that Joseph and I have the answers to this. We can contribute to these answers, to the questions that you're asking. They are critical questions that we think that the UNFPA, that is thinking about. Let us share some of the things that we have seen. First of all, you talk about independence. An evaluability assessment is not an evaluation. That is why we put that slide separating evaluation from an evaluability assessment. Is an assessment about the readiness, as you put, and about the quality. Is about the quality of all the elements that are needed in order to conduct an evaluation that will have to be independent. Therefore, there are plenty of organizations, they do the evaluability assessments themselves. So it's an internal exercise. You can incorporate it as a quality function, you see? So it doesn't need to be in the, of course, if you don't have the time, or the evaluability assessment is very complex because it's a joint program implemented all over the world, okay, then you hire a company to help you out. But in terms of it's a checklist, right? It's an assessment based on checklist. Is this in place? Is this in place? Is this happening? Yes, no. It's a bit more of a, I don't like the word, but it's a bit more of a quality audit on whether everything is in place in order to make the best use of the evaluation. So think of it about in terms of quality. If you let me answering your question, all this work done by here in this table, all this work done by ODI. ODI made a lot of research to make an overview of the utility of evaluability assessments. And you can see, they say, well, evaluability assessments, you ask about the timing. Well, the timing, you can use them throughout an intervention. So it's a quality checklist. So you can use it throughout. The thing, it depends on the depth you're doing it. If you don't have enough resources or you want to do it very much in depth, then you have to choose when you do it. But if this checklist is part of your team and you are looking at all these issues, so how are we doing in terms of the design? Is the design clear? Are we getting data? Is the institutional context conducive for an evaluation? You can be asking those questions throughout. So it all depends on the depth. And the way we see it is to have evaluability in mind, that should happen throughout. It's a quality element. So how is our M&E system? And you can see those things. You could incorporate just quick meetings, thinking about what is the degree of evaluability for a particular program. So at the end of the day, it's a play. It has to do with the resources and the intensity. And then when you say about the cost factor, evaluability assessments are checklists. You could do lean, LEAN, or agile evaluability assessments. Then you can do in-depth evaluability assessments. Then you can play around with that. But we really think that, for example, in the World Bank, they do a lot of evaluability assessments themselves internally. And when they do them, those evaluability assessments, or in IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, they don't have a huge budget. They do this checklist. They have a meeting internally, and they more or less look at the degree of evaluability and whether that intervention would be evaluable. And then they have the discussions. The problem, I think, and that's my personal opinion, Taranga, is when you don't do anything about evaluability, and then you do an in-depth evaluability assessment, and the response is don't do the evaluation. Or the response is you have to make all these changes in order to evaluate. I think that creates resistance. And I think that this is what happened with UNICEF strategic plan, because that creates resistance. There is already an expectation. There are commitments to the board on that evaluation. And then comes the evaluability assessment saying, oh, there are here a lot of things that you have to change. And that means resources. If you start thinking about that right from the beginning, first a little bit light, and then as you move forward a little bit more in depth, that function, that evaluability function, can produce better results. That's our take on that. Maybe Joseph, would you like to add?
Well, no, definitely, Jordi. I fully agree with your explanations. But to me, I'd like to emphasize in the context of adaptive evaluation, remember that in this program cycle, we have been mentioning how adaptive evaluation also challenges the traditional program cycle. The functions of evaluation and design actually become very, very closer than before. So including an evaluability assessment during the design of a program, of a strategic plan, of an intervention could actually, it's actually conceptually speaking, a practice of anticipation. So that could really help in making the evaluation more adaptive, to unpredictable and complex contexts. So definitely, I think, combining these two functions during the design of an intervention, to me, I think that's a way to go, in the context of adaptive evaluation. Over to you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on on evaluability assessments from anybody? And Taranga, did we contribute to somehow answer your questions, or at least add to the process of answering the question?
Oh yes, Jordi and Joseph. Yeah, I think you actually did a great job, and I got the main points. I also shared the UNICEF evaluability assessment, and you can see readiness checklist and some tools they used, and it's a complex evaluation, a complex evaluability assessment because of the strategic plan. So it was done by external, my understanding, and it was coordinated by the evaluation office. That's signed by people. When evaluation office coordinated, sometime I'm not trying to blame that, but people see it's more independent. That's the point comes here, and it's a little bit challenging situation in UN. So anyway.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Tanga, for the question. Okay, so we've just reached the end. We have the survey as usual. Now I will put. Do you have the link of the survey, Joseph, to put on the chat, or to avoid?
I don't have it right away, but
okay. So yes, thanks so much, Taranga, for the link in the chat. Yes, so you have the Survey Monkey. We have every time we finish a module, we have this quick survey. So those of you interested in evaluability assessments, please answer the survey, so we know the evaluation office know that you might be interested in doing this. We put just the link in the chat, so you double click. There are only 6 questions, multiple choice, very quick to answer, so we know which country office you're from, and maybe the fact that you could be interested in applying evaluability assessments, because then what's coming next, we have finished with all the appeals. Joseph, Valeria, and I, we're working on a guidance, on a lean practical document. So everything that we've looked at in these 6 pills is included in there. with all the resources so you can get back to those materials to be equipped for adaptive evaluations. That's the practical guidance. And then based off your interest, now the idea is that you roll these out, that all these methods that we have seen in those 6 pills, that you start practicing that. And then if you need coaching, assistance, accompaniment, Valeria, Joseph, and I will be there to accompany you through the process. That will be the practical aspect of it. And yeah, you have, this is the link to the Google Drive. You have now the 6 folders with the 6 pills, all the slides have the links. You can access all the materials. Then you go through that. And if you're interested in applying and testing these methods, just let us know. Here are our emails. Myanmar already tried outcome harvesting, and we already tried this process of being part of them applying the tool. And then yeah, we acted a bit of a soundboard. We had meetings with their contractors, and we were involved in all these discussions. And oh, Myanmar is happy. We're happy too. So it worked. Yep, Taranga.
Jordi and Joseph, we are also thinking about at the headquarter level using outcome mapping, outcome harvesting in measuring innovation. It's a big scale project. And because innovation team approached me asking about some help in terms of measuring innovation, innovative initiatives in the organizations, we are trying to apply outcome harvesting plus hybrid with our own measurement approach plus outcome harvesting, because we know outcome harvesting alone will not really help. So it's a hybrid version. I really want your help. So maybe we can discuss with Valeria also as part of this learning initiative, whether we can, work together, or maybe your advice on fine-tuning that methodology. It was piloted in 3 countries. We call it 5-point framework for measuring innovation. So we need to really, so I hope we can mobilize your support through this project also.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, ready to be part of that. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And the fact that you're using hybrid methodologies, that makes it even more interesting, because then we're walking the talk. Here, the idea is about pluralistic methods. So depending on the purpose you want, you pick up what is interesting from different methods and putting them together. So I really think that this could be a good experience for the organization as a whole. Yeah, definitely. Taranga, thanks for that. John, you raise your hand, please take the floor.
No, I was just trying to ask if you could share the link by email.
Okay, with link, the link for the survey? Yes,
please.
Okay.
I am at the moment driving.
Okay. Yes. So no problem, John. We will immediately send it to you by email, so you can reply when you get your destination.
Yeah, otherwise, I think the questions I wanted to ask were asked, and even the answers you gave. I participated in the evaluability assessment for the global program on ending child marriage. And that process entailed reconstructing the theory of change. That's when it got me thinking that I think it's better, it's a process that maybe needs to be started early, because it affects the design. It might determine that you revise the design. But again, I think your suggestion that you can start early in a lean way, then progressively, you do a more detailed one. So I think it was very useful guidance. And thank you very much.
No, thank you, John. Thanks a lot for your contributions and yeah, your points. We're very glad that you joined the PIL. And don't worry, we will send you right away. We will send you the link to the SurveyMonkey so you can give us your views and tell us if you're interested in applying evaluability assessments. Joseph, over to you. I think that this is it, right?
I think we have come across, right, Jordi? It's been a long way.
Yeah, nice
but
journey.
So far so exciting. And well, Taranga, we would like also to explore the applicability of this type of adaptive evaluation approaches in measuring innovation, of course. That's actually the applicability. It's been one guiding criteria Jordi and I followed, during those 6 pills. And while we've been so excited, to learn from country officers that are experimenting with that, And obviously, Taranga HQ has a lot, to do in enabling this adaptive evaluation environment, So, and innovation is of the essence. So please let us know.
Yeah, I mean, from our side, thank you so much, Jody Joseph. I know I'm talking about the other side of the organization, and I think I was attending time to time some of these pills, actually very interesting. And I was wondering why this was not reached many people in the organization. And so we need to make sure that, I will talk to Valeria also, maybe we introduced something called research dialogue this morning, a concept called research dialogue. So studies can come and brainstorm. We had a first meeting on AI, integrating AI into the planning, monitoring, and evaluation process this morning, where like around 75 people joined. And some of these colleagues also joined who are today. I think, Luca, you were there, right? John also. And
Yes, I was there.
Yes, so we can think about bringing overall learning of this in one of the research dialogue and to reach many colleagues. I'm pretty sure that this should not, this must go to the broader team here in the organization. Thank you so much from our side, and I will pass that message to Valeria also on behalf of the Arabian community here.
Thanks so much, Taranga. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. A pleasure. And yeah, well, goodbye to everyone. Good evening. Have a nice day.
Jody, thank you, Joseph.
Nice night.
Thank
Taranga,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
Bye-bye. All the
Bye.
best.
Bye.
Bye.